Chapter 10, Maternal Grandpa, MP.
In June 1970, I decided to return to India for the first time since arriving in the United States in 1966. There were good reasons for it. One, re-entry to the USA was allowed if you were a student. Two, I missed my family. Three, I had saved enough money to buy a $700 round-trip ticket offered by Air India. 4. I was awarded a graduate student assistantship for computer programming and applications in chemistry department, which secured my tuition and room and board for the final year of my MBA. And probably the most important, 5, I wanted to see my 82-year-old maternal grandpa, who I call Nana, who was elected to the upper house of the Parliament of India for a 6-year term in New Delhi. As soon as the plane landed in Bombay, a uniformed police officer met me on the tarmac and introduced himself. He worked for my father. I felt special as the police officer treated me like a celebrity. We bypassed the customs and went into a private room where my entire family and friends were waiting for me. My mother cried when she first saw me. Her younger son, for the first time in nearly 4 years. My father pretended to hold his composure, telling my mother to stop crying while he was fighting back his own tears. Soon everyone in the room had tears in their eyes, as it was a joyous reunion for all of us. The first thing my mother wanted to do when we got home was to prepare tea the way I liked it, strong, sweet with milk and tea masala. My dad and I went to the front room. "Congratulations on your promotion, Papa." I made a point to congratulate my father because I knew he had recently achieved his greatest career goal. He had been appointed Chief Police Prosecutor of Greater Bombay. That is the equivalent of holding the power of an Attorney General of a state. He liked this job and its associated prestige and power, and he also enjoyed the decent government pay increase. "I brought 2 bottles of scotch from America," I told him. "They're in my bag. Johnny Walker Black is for you, and Glenfiddich single malt scotch is for Nana." Even though I'm allowed 2 bottles of liquor for a personal use, I was worried that customs might confiscate them due to prohibition and all. My dad reached over and picked up the Times of India newspaper sitting on a nearby table. "What was the reason for you coming back here?" my dad asked. "Why did you spend the money you don't have to return home after all this time?" "Because I wanted to see you. I had been gone for 4 years and I missed you." "Okay, I was just concerned." He proceeded to read the newspaper. I was shocked. Just what the hell happened here? I had traveled a long way over many seas. Papa could have asked how my flight was. "How is America? How are you doing in school? Do you need anything? Are you happy?" Instead, he does not like how I spend my money, and he is giving his priority to that damn newspaper as if I'm not even here. I got up and joined my mother and sister in the kitchen. She had the tea ready. "So tell me all about your life in America," my mother asked, bubbling with enthusiasm. "We're so happy to see you." I think Papa doesn't like that I came home. I then proceeded to tell my mother what had just happened in the front room. No. Your dad loves you. I don't know why he says things like that. I'm going to talk to him right now." She jumped up and went to see him. My little sister smirked as our parents began to argue in the other room. after a few minutes of the muffled sound of what sounded like a battlefield, my mother returned to the room along with my father. At my mother's urging, my dad apologized to me. I told him it wasn't necessary, and I accepted his left-handed apology. Then my mother defended him and told me not to be so sensitive. Thanks for my mother's spanking, my dad was extra gracious to me for the rest of my stay in Bombay. He had reserved and paid for a sleeper class return train ticket from Bombay to New Delhi. A 15-hour one-way journey departed every day around 4 p.m. and arrived at its destination around 9 a.m. the following morning. New Delhi is the capital of India and was the place where my grandfather was serving his term. However, when I was little, my grandpa's house was in city of Bhuj. I mentioned earlier that Bhuj is a city in state of Gujarat, which is one state north of the state in which Bombay is located. During my childhood, we spent the summer months of April, May, and part of June in Bhuj. The rural atmosphere of Bhuj was drastically different from the crowded streets of Bombay that we were accustomed to. During those summer months, my siblings and I enjoyed the amenities of rural life, like the sunshine and the open and wide spaces to ride bicycles, in contrast to the heavily populated area where we lived. My mother also enjoyed traveling to Bhuj to see her family. She enjoyed the company of her mother and sisters. My dad never went with us. He always stayed back home because he had to work. When I arrived in New Delhi to visit my grandparents on this occasion, my grandpa's driver picked me up at the railroad station. He told me that my grandpa was in session but would be home by the time we got to his house. As we entered the gated community where my grandparents lived, I instantly took notice of the beautiful lush lawn and colorful flowers. In my mind, I could not help but make comparisons between this place and where I grew up in Bombay. When we arrived, I finally came face to face with my grandpa. He now carried an impressive title, Dr. Biharilal Naranji Antani, MP, B.A.D. Lit, Bar at Law, Oxford, UK. Back when he was working as an attorney, he differentiated himself in his law practice with expensive stationery glorifying the British Victorian era. His letter pads and envelopes were embossed with letters in premium calligraphic fonts. There was an emblem of his initials, B.N.A., and a script underneath that read, Deserve and Desire. He displayed to the world his degrees, Bachelor of Arts, Doctor of Literature, and Barrister at Law. When he was young, he and my grandmother moved to Zanzibar, Tanzania, in East Africa in order to find work. My mother and her sisters were born and raised in Africa while my grandparents were living there. Eventually, Nana moved to England and achieved his law degrees from University of Oxford in UK. Nana was elected to the Indian Parliament. He had already spent his formative years in England and Africa. Eventually, Nana moved to England and achieved his law degrees from the University of Oxford, United Kingdom. By the time Nana was elected to the Indian Parliament, he had already spent his formative years in England and Africa. Most importantly, Nana had a God-given talent for smoking a fine Cuban cigar every morning and drinking a couple of pegs of scotch, but never to excess. His new title, MP, Member of Parliament, proclaimed his life's ultimate achievement. He was quite proud of this accomplishment, and so was I, and I still am to this day. Very few families in India can say that they have a family member in Parliament. You see, the Parliament of India is the supreme legislative body of the country. It consists of two houses, a lower house called Lok Sabha, House of the People, and an upper house where my grandfather served called Rajya Sabha, Council of States. My grandpa and grandma were waiting for me. As soon as I arrived, I ran up to them and touched their feet to show respect and honor them. Grandpa picked me up and hugged me. His 82-year-old frame looked much better than I had anticipated. Why wouldn't it? He walked 8 miles every day. Grandma looked like what I thought my mother would look like in a few years from then. The first thing I did when I arrived was to present my grandpa with a bottle of Glenfiddich single malt scotch. That delighted him. He raised the bottle to my grandma and said, "We are going to have some fun tonight." It was nice being reacquainted with my grandparents after all these years. I always enjoyed my conversations with my grandpa. When I was little, he nicknamed me Dodhi. From then on, he referred to me as Dodhi for the remainder of his life. "Dodhi," said my grandpa, "we are invited to dinner by the Indian Consulate General from Zanzibar at their home. His family has come home for a few weeks. They want to meet you." He turned to my grandma and asked if she wanted to go. "No," she answered. "The two of you can go and enjoy yourselves." Grandma was defiant and seemed proud of it. I got the impression that this was not the first time she turned down an invitation from Nana. "We sure will," said Nana. Then he turned to me and muttered, "I would love to have her go with us, but she hates them all. She thinks the people I work with are stuck up and phony." He continued, "Well, and that's that, Dodhi. Tomorrow is a busy day. We are scheduled to meet with the President of India at 10 a.m., then at 10:30 a.m. with Prime Minister. We will then go see Nehru's place. I will be in session on the floor, Rajya Sabha, at 11 a.m. I made arrangements for you to watch me from the gallery and tour the surroundings." "Okay, Nana," I answered. "I will be ready." As promised, I was timely dressed and ready to go with my grandpa that next morning. Both Nana and I were dressed up in a suit and tie. When we arrived, a young man in an Indian Army uniform told us that we could go in because the president was ready for us. In India, the president is head of state and the prime minister is head of government. The president's job is to preserve, protect, and defend the Indian Constitution. Nana shook hands with President Varahagiri Venkatagiri, also known as V.V. Giri, and I touched his feet to show respect and display my submissiveness to the person much older, wiser, and in position of power. The president was extremely gracious during our visit. He welcomed us and offered me to sit next to him. He also offered us some tea, which I accepted and Nana declined. The president then gestured for one of his servants to get me tea. "So how are things in America?" the president asked me. "Your grandpa said you are working on your MBA. It is very good to get educated and come back to India. We need you here. You know, we're going to have to do something about our brain drain." It was a compliment. We continued to chat and sip our tea. At one point, the president asked if I had any questions for him. I was not expecting him to ask me this. I felt I was on the spot. Therefore, the question I asked was spontaneous. When I see President Nixon on TV, he seems stressed in his job. You, as the President of the Republic of India, how do you like your job, Mr. President? Wow, where did that come from? That was an odd question. I know that now, but at the age of 23, talking to the President of the most populated nation, what would you expect? A Pulitzer Prize-winning inquiry? The president took my arm and walked me over to a big portrait of Mahatma Gandhi that was hanging on his wall. You see, my son, we believe in following the principle of this great Mahatma. Your grandfather and I used to work with him in London. We called him Mohandas then. We are some of the very few leaders who still possess integrity and ethical conventionality in our government. What? Integrity and ethical conventionality? I know that my grandpa was a Diwan for 20 plus years during the British rule. Persian in origin, the title Diwan in India means highest official in the court. As a mark of respect, he was called Diwan Ji or Diwan Sahib. His job was to serve as a chief revenue officer of the first province of Jamnagar and later the province of Jawhar, 2 cities in India. That was like a fox managing a hen house. He was able to, quote, earn, unquote, enough to create an atmosphere of privilege at his large palatial estate called Narayan Nivas in his hometown of Bhuj. He provided opportunities to his children with private schools, governesses, and tutors. Once he hired an Englishman to teach my aunt to speak in English, but instead of learning to speak English, my aunt ended up teaching the Englishman how to speak fluent Gujarati. Yes, Mr. President, I said, both of you are accomplished gentlemen and are credit to India. I look up to you and aspire to accomplish what you have accomplished. I'm also proud of my grandpa. I thank you for the time you spent with me today. My remarks were truly genuine. I was indeed honored to have been in the presence of the President of India, and I was even more honored to be with my grandfather. Our next stop was with the third then-serving Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, the only child of first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. She was also the mother of Rajiv Gandhi, who later served as the 6th Prime Minister of India. Unfortunately, our scheduled meeting with the Prime Minister did not happen. When Nana and I showed up to meet the person who became one of the most, if not the most, famous Indian Prime Ministers in history, one of her assistants informed us that the Prime Minister was no longer available for our visit. She got pulled into an urgent matter, said the assistant, and she's unable to see you, Bihari Chacha, Uncle Bihari, and your grandson. She has sent her apologies and wants me to tell you that you have the door to her office any time. I turned to my grandpa. Yeah, right. I cannot imagine she found something better to do than to meet with me. Go figure. Nana chuckled. Dodhi, she's young, very smart, and she was schooled by her father. India needs her. Together, India and Indira have a great future. The following evening, back at my grandparents' house, Grandma and I were sitting in their beautiful lanai. Grandpa joined us after finishing his daily 8-mile walk. He settled in his chair and started to pour the single malt scotch on 3 cubes of ice. Grandma watched in quiet disapproval as the scotch poured into my grandpa's glass. Enough, enough, she hollered. That's too much. Grandma was attempting to control the uncontrollable. I love single malt, Nana said as he took a spoonful of his beloved salty Indian junk food and put it in its mouth. I love Glenfiddich. It has been a while. This is a treat, Dodhi. He then lit up a fat Cuban cigar. Dodhi, would you like to join me in having some scotch and a cigar? I really wanted to say yes. Boy, would I have loved to get a taste of that expensive scotch that I brought for him. Moreover, it would have been nice to puff on one of those Cuban cigars. I heard that the rich people do that kind of stuff. However, my grandmother was there, and out of respect for her, I declined my grandpa's offer. Then my grandpa and I had lengthy discussion on the political system of India in post-British rule. Our conversation also featured a discussion regarding the political scene in the United States. It was very interesting to listen to him. Many people talk about politics, but my grandpa had actually lived it. On that note, Nana asked me my thoughts on President Richard Nixon. Nixon had won the American presidency in 1968 after defeating then U.S. Vice President Hubert Humphrey. I shared with my grandpa some comments by Humphrey during the election and mentioned that Nixon won by very few votes. But Nixon won, Grandpa remarked. Well, yes, but Humphrey lost, Grandpa interrupted. Yes, I understand that, Nana, but I'm just saying I agree with Humphrey when he said, it does not matter what Humphrey said. He lost. Nixon won. End of story. You see, Dodhi, it is all about winning. If you cannot win, then you won't have the platform to put forth your ideas. If you are not in the majority, then you are in minority, and you don't count. So the bottom line is win. It's as simple as that. As the night progressed, Grandma talked about raising her children in Africa and the comedies and tragedies of the family. Grandpa told stories from the past. We laughed and had a memorable good time. As my grandpa continued sipping on his scotch, getting funnier and funnier, it was now my time to practice the basic principle of communication, that is, listen more, talk less. Nana, I'm going to ask you some questions. I would like you to tell me how you feel about it from your heart and not from your head. Grandma got the hint that this conversation was about to get philosophical. Oh no, she said. Now your grandpa is going to talk about himself. I can't listen to this. I'm going to bed. Don't stay up too late, you two, she said with affection and left. I waited for Grandpa to finish lighting his second Cuban. Here was my chance to take advantage of Grandma not being in the room. Nana, you are a very successful man. I saw that with my own eyes on this trip. I mean, how many people in the world get a chance to be in the offices of the President and Prime Minister of India and the members of Parliament full of amenities and privileges? How come then, when it comes to the household, Grandma rules? He seemed taken aback a little bit. He took a long puff on his fat Cuban and said, You are the first one who has asked me this question. Nobody would dare to ask me that. I, however, would like to think the reason you ask because you seek to understand. You want to learn, not gossip. So I'm going to answer it. Nana continued while sipping more of his scotch. You see, you are either born a turtle or a racehorse. One cannot be other. The turtle wonders why the horse is in a hurry, and the horse wonders why doesn't the turtle get off his ass and start running. Your grandma is 16 years younger than I am, and we have 6 children. She did not go to school. Women were not sent to school in those days. They were expected to and spend their lives raising children while men went to work to put food on the table. Women without an education do not have the proper tools. That makes their job difficult. I could not be a racehorse out in the working world and then be a turtle when I come home. Some of our adult children are now stumbling through life. Some people blame your grandma and some blame me. But seriously, what am I to do? I gave my children opportunities, and it was their responsibility to capitalize on them. I cannot do it for them, neither can your grandma. Whatever she was able to do, she has done her best, and I could not have done any of it. The biggest gift that I think I have given to her is to let her be herself and let her do what she wanted to do. People will tell you wealthy people's kids cannot do well in life because they were given everything. It does not have to be that way. Look at Jawaharlal Nehru. He was born with a silver spoon and had a boring childhood, and yet he became the first Prime Minister of India. I do not care what they think of me. I decide what I think of me. I have made the decision to think that I have done well. I have done things to the best of my abilities and the circumstances at the time. I have made mistakes and I have done some smart things. I always remember the good things and forget the rest. If people don't like me or how I think, then they can kiss my ass and make a love story. I detected the emotion laced with irritation. I figured it was time to change the subject. Nana, I don't know of anybody who is as wealthy as you are. Are you just that good or are you just lucky? You just don't have conversation like this with your grandparents, but I figured, what the hell, why not? People who don't understand me think I got lucky, said my grandfather. People who have capabilities and are willing to put in hard work understand that the success is the residue of diligence. You mentioned wealth, so here's how I'm going to answer it. He took a sip and a puff. Do you remember two goddesses? Now that you have come from America, you have forgotten what we taught you. Let me refresh your memory. In the heart of every human being, there are two goddesses. Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, is beautiful and generous. If you worship her, she may present to you with money and material possessions, but she is unpredictable and may also withdraw her support without warning. The other goddess is Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom. If you worship Saraswati and dedicate yourself to attaining wisdom, Lakshmi becomes jealous and will follow you for the rest of your life. The more you seek wisdom, the more enthusiastically Lakshmi will chase you, showering you with wealth. Today, at the age of 82, I have won a 6-year term in the parliament. I pursued Saraswati all my life, and she has brought Lakshmi with her to stay with me forever. I could see scotch was doing its job. My grandpa Nana was going to give me a grandfatherly wisdom. So clearly, it is not luck, Dodhi. True success will come from within you. Pursue wisdom and not wealth when you go back to America. I want you to get immune to flattery and criticism. Become fearless and know that you are neither beneath nor superior to anyone. Do not try to chase money. Earn it. Lakshmi, as quick as she will come to you, is just as fast at leaving you. In seeking Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom, you will find infinite possibilities and get comfortable with uncertainties. Success is ensued, not pursued. Sustained wealth comes from doing good things to others. So be clear on what you want and then go out and get it. He stood up and gulped down the remainder of his ice-laced glass of fine single malt scotch. You have the train to catch early tomorrow, said Nana before leaving the room to retire for the night. A few minutes later, from the thin walls, I heard the sound of him saying a prayer. Loosely translated, it said, O Kalyaneshwar Datta, my higher power, I have your support. My worries are yours. Take care of my family and friends and let the rest go to hell. Next day, My bag was already placed in the sleeper class compartment of the train. My grandpa and grandma came to the train station to see me leave for Bombay. It was around 4:30 p.m. The sun was in full spirit and it was hot. I touched my grandma's feet. She was crying. When I went to touch my grandpa's feet, he quickly picked me up by the shoulder and hugged me tight. I just had that feeling. That exact same feeling was triggered in him too. He held me tight. I heard him sob. The train began to move and I froze. "You have to go," he said tenderly. I moved away, stepped on the panel of the train, and looked back. Grandpa knew it, and I had caught on. This would be the last time we would ever see each other. Grandpa passed away the following year. Aha! So what have we learned? 1. You are born either a turtle or a racehorse. 2. Today shall pass. 3. Success is residue of diligence. 4. Be clear on what you want and go get it.